that was my first time seeing like, oh my God, it's when I get squeezed, right? And I need to give myself grace. It's this boy inside of me that's like rebelling, that wants to be seen. Hello and welcome to the Weaponized Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hewitt.
And I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt.
Today we have a special episode for everybody. Not that every episode isn't special, but I feel like today's episode is something that you're not going to find on a lot of podcasts. And you're probably not going to find a lot of married couples that have done this together. Mm-hmm. And that is, we want to talk today about how plant medicine has changed our lives, changed our marriage, and just talk about how it has shifted us in general. So Kendra, why don't you lead off by talking about why you decided to do plant medicine with me as your husband?
Okay. So Ryan has always been curious about it.
Let's say more open.
I should say more open to it. And I think mine hesitation towards it is that I just didn't understand it. Like I didn't know like what.
Well, even when I say plant medicine, most people probably don't know what that means, right?
I think we should possibly define what that means.
Well, do you know what it means?
Not a good bit.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
describe it.
Plant medicines have been described to me as what are called entheogens, right? So they're obviously psychedelic substances that come from both plant and lab, I suppose. They're not all natural substances.
Not all of them.
I mean, psilocybin, for example, from mushrooms is something that it's a psychedelic that is natural. But the plant medicine journeys that we've done together, for example, the 3 that we've done together have been medicines that are, I think, a combination of both plant and chemical. Mm-hmm. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's essentially what it is. So carry on.
I think we should talk a little bit of how it works up front too. No.
You tell me why did you decide to do plant medicine with me?
So Ryan went to his first plant medicine in June of last year.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think a huge breakthrough for me was that he had an opportunity to do it with a very good friend of ours that a couple that we know. I actually did not know the wife, but I knew the guy that was starting to run these retreats. And it was very intriguing to me because this person that was going to host a retreat also, like, I did not see this coming, that this would be something that he would be interested in. Because we had crossed paths from the real estate industry. So, fast forward to June, and Ryan goes through his first plant medicine retreat, and he like comes out of it, and he has so many takeaways, I guess I wanted to say. Like, you had a really good experience. Mm-hmm. And I knew you were going to come home and you would say, I really want you to do it with me.
How did you know that?
Just because I knew that's where it was going to end up.
You knew that?
Oh my, 100%.
Okay.
And I was kind of calibrating myself on like, hey, how was I going to like handle this? And I just remember this kind of intuitive feeling that like, if this was something that was going to, something I was going to be open to, that I would know when the time was right. Like I just kind of left it settled with that. And one of the things that Ryan originally went for his plant medicine retreat, this is why I think it really kind of got me into it, was he was looking to resolve a lot of his anger and reactivity that was kind of unspoken for. Like he didn't really know where it came from, but it was really starting to affect our marriage. Mm-hmm. And after that retreat, I remember him sharing with me. We went out to dinner so he could explain like what the experience was like. And I remember how you asked Peggy, and Peggy was like, if like you were like, will this feeling of like peace or like unresolved anger, like will it dissipate? Like will it stay with me? Like this calm I'm feeling after that retreat. And she was like, well, like that's really not given. You might keep some of that anger and reactivity might come back, or it might dissipate. And I think that was like a couple months went by, and I noticed that your anger and reactivity was still there at times, but not to the level
So why did you decide to
of
do the next retreat with me? Because I signed us up and paid for it, and you still, even at the last minute, weren't totally sold.
yeah, I said I was starting to be open. I guess if you really want to know the answer in a nutshell, I was like, well, you didn't die.
You
So,
did you
and
think that there was a possibility that I would die?
well, here's the thing. I obviously am a type A, recovering type A, I should say. And I had no experience with any drugs whatsoever. So, what I had to close the gap was this is similar to us talking about the hormone therapy last time,
Mhm.
was I had to start to bend the frame on what plant medicine was without being able to get a real definition of what I was gonna experience,
Mhm.
because you don't really know.
Well,
Like,
it's not that you don't know, it's just it's very difficult to explain.
it's very difficult to
So,
explain.
rather than try to explain to people, like, what it's like, I think that the I think the most powerful thing we could tell people about is how. So, first of all, I wanted to know why we decided to do it together and why we've done
Mhm,
it together now 3 separate times
mhm,
and how it's changed our marriage,
mhm.
right?
Um,
Again,
so, I mean, obviously, the first time I was going in for my own personal reasons. I wasn't really thinking about us, like, how it would affect us as a couple,
mhm,
because I didn't know any of that information going into it. Um, and that first time specifically was a couple months later after your first experience by yourself. Um, and I realized that, like, some of my I had curiosity about it even though I had a lot of, like, unknowns, which for me to pursue something that is, like, kind of unknown or uncertain for me is not very kinda, like, typical me about of me, but I felt open to it.
okay.
And I you did sign us up, and then, like, I got nervous. I was like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah,
Like, I said yes to this, and I don't really know, and, like, my what's the brain? Like,
monkey brain.
the monkey brain kinda, like, stepped up a notch. So, I was like even to the day that we went that first time, I was like I can remember, like, even getting in the car being like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like,
Yeah, you were
you know what I mean?
very
Like,
I'm
I was
just
very
I
nervous.
remember even the day before you were you got triggered, you got upset
Mhm.
about even going.
Yeah. But I also did know that usually when you do big events like that, whether they're any type of personal developmental event, it's very normal for stuff that needs to be healed to come up like a couple days, maybe even a couple weeks prior to the event. So I had some sort sense of peace that stuff that was coming up for me was like stuff that I was ready to work through.
Yeah, so I feel like the first 2 plant medicine journeys we did together, both of us had more or less our own, we really had our own personal stuff that we were working on or that we got benefit, things that we, I think, were going through personally that we got benefit from. This last time I do feel that together we, I think, healed a lot of trauma together. I feel like this last one we really kind of went through together
Mhm,
rather than the first 2 we did more individually. Would you
mhm.
say that that's
But
true?
I think, like, when we think about how does plant medicine affect your marriage,
Mhm.
reality is that you get better as yourself more healed with yourself as an individual. You
Exactly.
obviously bring a more healed soul to your marriage. You both are gonna benefit from that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so for me, like you touched on it originally, so the first time I went was, I felt a lot of release from, some of the, I think the anger, it was more or less just like the unresolved expectations that I put on myself, and I was going through a lot at the time, building a separate business while trying to, like, put our current business together because we had an employee leave and a big shakeup.
Mhm,
So I think there was like I felt like I was getting squeezed, and what was coming out was all of this, like, frustration and and anger and reactivity and whatnot, and, it was coming out at home and things, and I hated it because it reminded me of my childhood and how stressful it was growing up in a house that was in constant disarray and argument and strain, right? So I feel like that first time it helped me really give myself more grace. That's really the takeaway I got. And that's why I did feel some relief that did last. And I still feel that lasting today because I do feel that I
Mhm.
do identify like, okay, yes, I do really put a lot of pressure on myself. And that's where a lot of my like unspoken, unresolved expectations come from that I take out on other people, especially you
Mhm.
and whatnot. When we did our first one together, I was very focused on your experience because I wanted it to be really good.
Mhm.
So I did get some good takeaways. That's where I really like kind of got to speak with my mom and realized I needed closure with her death. That's when I decided, like, okay, on the anniversary of her death, I'm going to spread her ashes because I still had held on to her ashes. And I think that that gave me closure, and I did feel a lot of gratitude for that. But I think that that one I was really focused on making sure you had a great experience. And I think you, for the first time, in my opinion, that was the first time you've ever felt in your life, maybe since you were a kid, like what it was like to be out of your head and into your body,
Mhm.
right? Not just in your heart and have an open heart, but into your body. And I knew this because later that night, while we were still kind of, spun up in the medicine after everyone was like to go to bed, and I could just like when we were in bed together, it was different, and I'll never forget it. It just felt so different to be like to have you look at me and feel me and hold me. I was like, this is what I've been missing, for you, but also for me,
Mhm.
just that connection with you. So, and I think you recognize that too. And which is which is why that, we're like, okay, we're doing this again. Right. And then the second time, you can talk about your experience. The second time for me, this is when I had my most powerful um, vision for my life. And it wasn't about the future, it was about the past.
Mhm.
And it gave me a lot of understanding of like where this expectation I put on myself comes from. And it comes from like a younger version of myself that's looking to be seen and to be loved and to be important and recognized, right? And I think I ever since I was like 10 or 12 years old, I haven't felt that. I kind of got lost in the shuffle of four of us, right? Three brothers, and I was very independent after that. And ever since then, I've had a chip on my shoulder because nothing has ever. I've never been like extraordinary at anything, right? So I've always had to work really, really hard at whatever it was, being an athlete, being a student, being fit, whatever it
Mhm.
was. And
Can I interject one thing
hold
right
on,
there?
I just want to finish this thought. So there was the first, like, it was in the beginning of when we took the medicine, where when we had the opportunity to basically just have the meditation for 20, 30 minutes, this is when I had that vision, and it showed me it unlocked for me that understanding of like where that pain comes from and who is reacting in me when I feel like I'm not good enough,
Mhm.
right? So, and that was kind of like the first step into, and it sounds so uh, ridiculous. It sounds like, oh my God, you're like, but healing your inner child. And I think it's big, man. It's massive with men, especially who have reactivity, who have anger, who have self worth issues, who have like confidence problems. It's massive.
Mhm.
And I definitely have that. And that was my first time seeing like, oh my God, it's when I get squeezed, right? And I need to give myself grace. I also, it's this boy inside of me that's like rebelling, that wants to be seen.
Yeah. I was gonna say what I was gonna interject was that I think it's also one of the huge things about this type of work is if you are ready to do and open to doing healing, it accelerates it on a level you can't even understand.
Right.
And one of the things I think that you, like, met in that little boy, which, like, I so loved seeing, even as, like, as hard it was to watch you kind of talk to that little boy who was so hurt, um, was that, like, you were coming to terms with the, um, fear of rejection.
Mhm.
that is an unconscious fear that for you is a big driver. And I think that, like, even people probably listening to this, like, they would look at you and be like, "Wow, Ryan's confident, Ryan's all of that kind of stuff." But there was a disconnect for you in, like, your ego self, like what you put out into the world versus what you
Right.
felt inside. And I
Yes.
think this was the first time that you actually were able to put those 2 together. And that's a really good way for it, I think, to explain, like, how plant medicine works in a little bit more, like, easier to digest fashion is that, like, you think about, like, our person that leads the retreat, he did this really good explanation. He talks about how, like, you have this face that you put out into the world,
Mhm.
right? Like, the face that, like, "Hey, I'm confident, I get my shit
It's the
together."
program you run.
Right? It's the programs you're running, what he calls it is the mask, and it's really the ego self, right? Like, of,
Sure.
like, that, and then you have this programming that's actually internalized behind it that's unconscious. And you start to what happened the plant medicine starts to remove the mask
Mhm.
so you can connect with the actual unconscious drivers, like you were this fear of rejection that you were starting to confront. And it shows you the power of how growth happens when you have access to both the light, the good, the grace, the gratitude, and also confront the dark
Mhm. Right,
instead of run away from it
right.
and or find band-aids or sedation methods for it.
Yeah, most people just push the darkness aside. They want to, like, there was one guy in the group, he's just like, "I don't think about the past ever. I only look at the future. I'm only positive. I'm only this." And what came out of his mouth after that was like, "Well, what did he say? I really want my family to do this," because you can tell there's pain there of what has occurred with him and his family in the
Yeah.
past. And it's like, well, in a lot of cases, it's amazing like the healing that happens with the plant with the medicine is different for everybody. Like you don't
Mhm.
have to be,
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't have to be feeling screwed up to do this. Like it helps you, either deepen bonds with yourself, relationship with yourself and or others, and, like, even, like, the people that led the medicine retreat, they said their favorite work is to do with families and with
Mhm.
couples, but especially families because, like, trauma wounds and like, family stuff is just, like, in every family, right?
Mhm.
And that's like, a lot of people at the end of it the next day are like, "Oh my god, I wish my dad was here. I wish
Mhm.
my brother was here. I wish my
Us
sister was
included.
here." Yeah, and what it does is it like you said, it removes all of this old bullshit and, like, all the bullshit that you put in front of how you actually feel, right?
Mhm.
So, like, for me, for example, like, I really love my dad, but, we don't have this relationship where we're just, like, telling each other, like, "Oh my god, I love you so much. I appreciate
Mhm.
all this about you," and I've started to say and do things, but, um, in that opportunity, it just removes all of the ego and the bullshit and all the trauma, and it allows you to express your true feelings and emotions would and past that point, like, you don't forget about this stuff, like, it's not like you're drunk or whatever and you don't remember, like, you remember
Mhm. Mm-mm.
everything, and it just allows you to, like, rebuild bridges,
Yeah.
right, with people, with like I said, with other people and yourself. So,
Yeah.
as far as, like, you and I, like, you in the second time was, I think, a lot rougher for you,
Mhm.
because you this time, instead of like a really happy, positive experience, it was more like you started to grieve things in your
Mhm.
life that you never really realized you didn't take the opportunity to
Mhm.
grieve, right? Like the passing of your dad, your mom's failing health, and some of the other stuff, right?
Mhm. Like, recent loss of Lisa, I think,
Yeah.
really came up a
Recent loss of
lot.
a good friend of ours.
Um And the second time, I was left kind of reeling a little bit on that one because
Mhm,
I did not anticipate the level of grief was still present that actually came up in me.
mhm,
Um, and fast forward to this journey, one of the things that I really took away from this one was about how some of the grief that I kind of couldn't put my finger on and it was like kind of catching me by surprise was really grief of like letting go of my old identity
mm,
of things that I know I was helpful in the past, but is not something that's gonna serve me in the next level of my life
mhm,
or the next chapter, some people like to describe it as. And I think that this last journey that we did last weekend was me really starting to see that make that connection. Which is why I think it's been so powerful for it's just like anything. It's like you're not gonna go to a therapist once or the gym once and be like, "Hey, I'm in great shape," or like, "My therapist helped me in one session." It's like you're continuing it's like peeling the layers of an onion off, right? You're continuing to peel the next layer. This time, I had a really, really powerful experience, um, just with, like, gratitude, and, like, just like you said, for the first time on the journey, like, I felt like what it felt like to have my head not work thinking,
Mhm.
and how much I needed that release. And then I think bringing it into our marriage, it's like, I've talked to other people that are very intrigued because they've seen us now as a couple several times do this work, and they're like, "How does it work as a couple?" Like, there's a lot of scenarios, right? Like, one is like, "Hey, my wife's allowing me to do this, but she would never do this herself." Or, "But she really needs this stuff." Or, "But I don't know how to get her here." And then what I think is, like, the message I really wanna take them to take away from a couple's perspective of possibly entertaining this. And I think we should really share some rules of, like, if you're looking to do this, like, what you should look for, because that's really important. Like what we looked for maybe, because this is getting much more popular and it is
Yeah, we can share that at the end, but why don't
yeah.
you like, what I want people to know is, like, how this has helped our marriage, especially after this last journey together, and I can talk
Well,
about
I
it from
think
my
that's part
perspective.
of it is that you're still digesting that, right? Like, it
Yeah.
takes weeks for you to really, like, kind of but the initial takeaways, I think, is that, like, I'm just so grateful for the life we have built up to this point.
Mhm.
And most of all, I feel like a lessening of pressure on myself to make it we should be here and focusing on what's next. I'm very future oriented. It's very difficult for me to stay in the present.
Mhm.
So, um, I think that what you really want at this stage of our game is me to be present.
Mhm.
Um, which like I thought about even our last episode, I was like, man, we still want the same thing,
Mhm.
which is to be present and to be here for each other. But you can't do that if you have so much internal battle going on
Right.
of unhealed shit.
Good point. Yeah, that's powerful.
And so I think that it's a commitment to each other to continue to do this work. I think that we both go into these journeys where it's like, hey, we're gonna let each other have our own experience, but if we need each other, we also know how to
Mhm.
um I don't want to say engage, but like we know how to kind of like read each other of like, hey, and it's like cool too in these journeys is that like some people, depending on, they give you a customized plant like medicine protocol when you're there, right? And it's based on really what your intention is. Like the leaders really do their homework, I find, and they really do tune in to what you need. Um, and the reason I bring that part up is like there were some points where I was just like, "Ryan, like, I wanna engage with other people," and, like, he went engaged with other people, but then we would come back together and we would pick up, like, on a totally different topic, which is totally, like, fine. It's not like, "Hey, we're here to work on our marriage
No.
together."
No, none of that happened, and I feel like the first 2 journeys together, we didn't do that at all.
Mm-mm. Dude,
So I felt like the 3rd one, we got the opportunity to, and it was just almost supposed to happen that way because there was still so much work to do individually, and I feel like through doing that work and talking to each other about it, um, I think what happens is you really get to see the other person for who they are. Like,
mm,
you learn that through therapy, you learn this through altered consciousness experiences, like, you have to take yourself out of your environment, otherwise you're just stuck in the doing of the
mhm.
mundane day to day. So, when you start to connect, you could start to become more seen to the person, because I can't tell you how many people end up getting divorced, especially when you've been married for a long time, because they cease to be seen, and then the other person stops engaging because they're just tired of trying, or they're tired of not being seen and they want to be, and they
Attention
seek
otherwise, yeah.
attention from someone
Mhm.
else.
Yeah.
So this isn't like, it's the ultimate opportunity to really see the other person, because you do change. I mean, you're
Mhm.
a different person when you've been married 15 years or when we first got
Mhm.
married. and you live a lot of life in between then and 15 years for us, especially. So this particular time, we got to retell our story to somebody
Mm,
simultaneously, through all the traumatic events where you're so open that it all flows out. And I got to hear things that Kendra said from her perspective, having lived through those experiences and those things we've, been and done together, that I never knew before, right? And
mm,
she said the same thing to me. It's like, "Oh my god, I never knew that's how you felt or that's why you did that or whatnot." And, yeah, you're in a place where there's no judgment and it's completely open and, like, safe, right? Because otherwise you would never, like, open up and tell somebody all of your deepest,
mhm,
darkest shit
mhm,
otherwise, right? But it's just a container that for that night is, like, very safe, very open, and
mhm,
everyone's heart is open. And for the first time, I feel like we got to tell our story to somebody
mhm,
along the same timeline, but from each other's perspectives. So I felt like that was like some of the best work we've done as a couple
mhm,
in the plant medicine specifically, because a lot of it I feel like we've done individually otherwise,
mhm,
right? And just having known, all of the things that have happened that, you know, that are, that are the reason you're you today. And then same thing for me. Like I feel like we know that better than ever
mhm.
at this point.
What I think was amazing about what you're referring to, Mitch, I don't know if you wanna tell a little bit of part of the story, but I was sharing part of how I saw when we were really in the pit of our marriage with another friend of ours who was also, like, at this retreat with ours, and he was not a guy that I knew on a very deep level, like, any of his story.
Mhm,
And what was amazing is he returned with sharing some really dark stuff that had happened to him
mhm,
that he had confronted, and we had so many similarities.
mhm,
Um, but what it did is it brought up this conversation of like, I feel like the kind of lingering things that still needed were still there. And what it showed me was how fucking crazy your unconscious memory is.
yeah,
Because we were talking about events from two perspectives that happened 7 years ago,
mhm,
right? And it was amazing when I was telling this event, the level of detail I could see it in and the things that I shared with you that really, like, I was like, we would have never had a conversation like this
mhm.
in passing, like, or in just, like, even planned where we wanted to talk about
On a
this.
date night or something, yeah.
On a date night, it just wasn't, like, in, like, and it's so funny because this is what I think is the funny part, is, like, you know how, like, that saying about, like, alcohol, like, helps you tell the truth or whatever? And neither one of us
Liquid
are
truth, yeah.
yeah, neither one of our big drinkers.
Yeah.
But we'll have definitely enjoy a cocktail, and I was like, "Dude, what we were sharing on that level, this is the real truth.
Yeah.
Like, this is how we felt about it." And I was like, and it was so, just like you said, clearing, but connecting at the same time for us as a couple.
Mhm,
And then I know who we shared it with also, like, it hit him hard.
mhm,
And in the I think in some of the dark side, like we're talking about again, but also in some of the light, like some of the stuff that he has so, and one of the things that was really powerful that even he shared is he talked about how very successful guy, and he had picked up and moved his family
mhm,
from this area
mhm,
to another area, and about how he thought he was doing that to kinda, like, save his, like, business, or, like, to get away from working so much is
mhm,
what he said, like, the physical move. But what he realized was that it was him really going to save and reconnect his family
mhm.
on a whole other level.
Right.
And that, I think, is like how, in a nutshell, the medicine has started to work for us, is that it's like it's healing things that we don't even know have impacted our relationship,
Mhm.
like the things that we decided to share.
Yeah, I mean, and those things are things we otherwise would have just stuffed down or minimized or forgot about or
Yeah.
and it's not that everything that's happened to us is significant, but
Yeah.
there's definitely things that have happened to us that are significant that we've otherwise probably just not resolved or
Yeah.
have let, sabotage some of the way that we operate. So
And I think too that, like, because I think a lot of people are gonna be like, "What is it? Like, what are you guys doing?"
yeah. So like in closing,
Yes, let's close it with that
close it with
because I
this.
wanna kinda give some context to that.
We're not going to tell you where to go, and we're
Yeah,
not going to
no, we're
tell
not
you
gonna
how
do
to get
that.
plant medicine and everything. But I think just making sure that it's not like go get some like MDMA or some
And do it
psilocybin
yourself.
and do yourself. Like, okay,
No,
whatever. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've done mushrooms before. Like when I was younger, you take macrodose
and
and
I've never done
and
that.
have a good time, that. But yeah, and it's a great time. But it's a much different intention. So the
Mhm,
medicine is not so much different than the MDMAs and the psilocybins, right? It is that stuff, but it's done in a way where it's either guided or a
facilitated.
facilitated, guided or facilitated with an intention. The intention is the biggest piece, and that you're in a space that is like safe and a place where you're going to be able to have that protected experience, right?
Mhm,
So it's just like nobody's leaving, no one's driving, nobody like everyone's staying over. This is like, an experience that's built in order for you to have breakthrough, right?
yeah.
For you to be able to take away, healing, magic, whatever it
I'm
is.
watching it right now.
Yeah, and to be able to, have some productive
Yeah.
effort
I think one
moving
of the
forward.
things in closing too is that, like, just a reminder that intention is everything. Like, that's when I think about the plant medicine, that's what I think about,
Yeah,
is explaining it to people, is that, like, whatever you bring into an intention is, like, that's what's gonna become that's what's gonna start to manifest.
exactly. And we'll probably do more podcasts about this maybe after our next plant medicine. We do 'em once a quarter so far. So,
Yeah.
listen, if you have any questions, feel free to DM either Kendra or I.
Mhm.
Be happy to share our experience. As always, like, share, and
Rate,
review.
review, and subscribe.
Rate, review, subscribe. Yes. And we appreciate you guys listening. And we will see you guys on the next episode.